You might think there's nothing but goodness inside you, but you may be wrong. You might be part of that half of the group who, when given a sense of authority, turned into the worst form of evil in a study conducted at Stanford by Philip Zimbardo. But what makes a person capable of evil? Why did those good, ordinary people turn to commit evil acts? These are some of the questions that Philip Zimbardo answered deeply in his seminal work, The Lucifer Effect. Zimbardo challenges us to consider the unsettling possibility that human behavior is far more malleable than we might think. The notion of a strict divide between good people and evil people is not only simplistic, but also ultimately dangerous. The title, The Lucifer Effect, draws inspiration from the biblical story of Lucifer, God's most beloved angel, who became Satan, the embodiment of evil. The transformation from light to darkness parallels Zimbardo's examination of the forces that lead ordinary individuals into extraordinary acts of cruelty. Zimbardo aimed to teach us to abandon the comforting notion of a strict divide between good people and evil people. Instead, he asks, am I capable of evil? His research reveals that the line separating these states is not fixed but permeable, influenced by situations, systems, and psychological mechanisms. His research pushes us to rethink our assumptions about morality. It asks us to consider what happens when we, as individuals, find ourselves in situations that encourage or even reward immoral behavior. This question lies at the heart of the Lucifer effect, and the answer is far from comforting. The potential for evil exists within all of us. It is not just the actions of inherently bad people, but the environments and systems that can lead individuals to commit acts they would otherwise find unimaginable. Evil isn't some distant abstract force. It is the slippery slope that starts with small, seemingly insignificant things. It's not as though our nature is written on stone, but on sand, constantly shifting with circumstances. This was all proven in the Stanford Prison Experiment, where human nature was revealed in astonishing ways within just 6 days. What happens when you put good people in an evil place? Does humanity win over evil, or does evil triumph? These were some of the questions explored in the Stanford Prison Experiment. Let's see what was done in that experiment. In August 1971, psychologist Philip Zimbardo transformed the basement of Stanford University's psychology building into a mock prison. He advertised for college students to participate in a study where they would take on the roles of prisoners or guards. Out of 75 volunteers, 21 male students were selected after being screened for psychological normality. Each participant was paid $50 per day, and roles were assigned randomly. The goal was to make the simulation as realistic as possible. Prisoners were unexpectedly arrested at their homes and taken to a local police station where they were fingerprinted, photographed, and booked, just like actual criminals. Afterward, they were blindfolded and transported to the mock prison at Stanford. Upon arrival, the prisoners were stripped naked, deloused, and issued uniforms, a smock with a number written on it, no undergarments, a nylon cap, and a chain around one ankle. They were referred to only by their assigned numbers to emphasize dehumanization. Guards were provided with uniforms, whistles, handcuffs, and dark sunglasses to prevent eye contact with prisoners. Although physical violence was prohibited, the guards were responsible for maintaining order and control over the prisoners. The prison was designed to feel authentic, with barred doors and windows, bare walls, and small cells. Both groups quickly adapted to their roles. Within hours, the guards began harassing prisoners, behaving in brutal and sadistic ways, and many seemed to enjoy the power they held. The prisoners, in turn, conformed to their roles, becoming submissive and dependent. They began to discuss prison life frequently, follow rules rigidly, and even align themselves with the guards against prisoners who resisted. Over time, the guards' mistreatment escalated. They subjected prisoners to insults, arbitrary rules, and degrading tasks. Prisoners were forced to perform monotonous and humiliating assignments, and were punished for minor infractions. As the guards' disdain for the prisoners grew, the prisoners became increasingly submissive, creating a cycle of escalating aggression and dependence. Some prisoners even sought to gain favor with the guards by informing on their peers. The psychological toll was evident. One prisoner was released after 36 hours due to uncontrollable emotional breakdowns, including screaming and crying. Over the next few days, 3 more participants had to leave the study due to severe emotional distress, displaying symptoms such as depression and disorganized thinking. These individuals had been considered psychologically healthy before the experiment. Although the study was initially intended to last 2 weeks, it was terminated after 6 days due to the extreme psychological impact on the participants and the risk of further harm. Following the experiment, a debriefing session was held, during which participants reflected on their experiences. Many participants were shocked at how deeply they had internalized their roles. One guard admitted, "I was surprised at myself. I made them call each other names and clean toilets with their bare hands. I started seeing them as cattle and kept thinking they might try to retaliate." Another reflected, "Acting authoritatively can be fun. Power can be a great pleasure." A third guard described an incident where he struck a prisoner, explaining, "During an inspection, I messed up a prisoner's bed. He grabbed me by the throat, laughing, but I was scared. I hit him with my stick, not hard, but I became angry afterward." Prisoners were equally stunned by their behavior. Many, who described themselves as typically assertive, were shocked at how submissive and dependent they had become. They compared the guards to archetypes found in real prisons. Some were fair, others tough but reasonable, and a few outright cruel. The rapid descent into this dynamic demonstrated how quickly ordinary people can transform when placed in a dehumanizing environment. It wasn't that the guards were inherently cruel. It was the situation they were in. The power dynamics, anonymity, and lack of oversight pushed them to act in ways they likely never would have in different circumstances. But there were multiple factors that caused this transgression, which I'll discuss in this video. Authority and power wield immense influence over human behavior, often compelling individuals to act against their personal moral codes. Psychologist Philip Zimbardo explored this phenomenon in his study of evil, focusing on how environments governed by authority and systemic pressures can transform ordinary individuals into perpetrators of harm. Zimbardo argued that evil is rarely the product of inherently bad apples or fundamentally immoral individuals. Instead, the true problem lies in the bad barrel, systems and structures that create conditions where cruelty and harm become normalized. This shift from focusing on individual actions to examining systemic forces is essential for understanding how environments foster extraordinary acts of cruelty. A central mechanism in this transformation is dehumanization. When systems strip people of their humanity, empathy diminishes, and moral barriers dissolve. This psychological distancing allows individuals to rationalize harm against others who are no longer seen as human beings, but as obstacles or symbols of opposition. For example, at Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, detainees were dehumanized through systemic practices that framed them as enemies deserving of punishment. This dehumanization fosters an us versus them mentality, enabling individuals to justify harmful actions as part of fulfilling a duty. This process is further reinforced by anonymity, which diminishes personal accountability. When individuals act as part of a collective or within the confines of a role, their sense of responsibility becomes diluted. Uniforms, titles, and hierarchical structures of authority create a shield that separates actions from personal identity. In such environments, individuals no longer see themselves as moral agents, but as instruments of the system. The Milgram experiment, conducted by Stanley Milgram in 1961, illustrates how authority can compel individuals to act against their morals. Participants, under the guise of a study on learning and memory, were instructed to administer electric shocks to a learner for every incorrect answer. Although the shocks were fake, the participants believed they were real. Despite hearing cries of pain from the learner, about 65% of participants continued to administer shocks up to the maximum voltage when urged by an authority figure in a lab coat. This experiment highlighted how the presence of authority can override personal morality, driving individuals to engage in actions they would otherwise consider unacceptable. Moral disengagement plays a significant role in enabling these behaviors. It allows individuals to suppress their moral instincts by reframing harmful actions as necessary or justified. Phrases like, "I'm just following orders," or "this is for the greater good," become tools for rationalizing behavior that would otherwise provoke moral conflict. In environments like wars, soldiers often operate within a culture that provides these justifications. Systemic narratives, such as protecting national security or maintaining control over detainees, offer convenient rationales for actions that violate basic human rights. When authority legitimizes or ignores harmful actions, it signals that such behavior is acceptable. This influence doesn't always come in the form of direct orders. Often, the absence of oversight or accountability emboldens individuals to act. At both Abu Ghraib and Evin prison, a lack of accountability from those in power created environments where cruelty became normalized. Soldiers and guards understood that their actions would go unchallenged, reinforcing a culture of abuse. Bystanders also play a crucial role in perpetuating systemic harm. Their silence, whether due to fear, indifference, or a sense of powerlessness, reinforces authority and normalizes abusive behavior. This passivity signals to perpetrators that their actions are acceptable. The interplay of dehumanization, anonymity, moral disengagement, authority, and bystander inaction creates a perfect storm for systemic abuse. These forces feed into one another, fostering environments where cruelty is not only tolerated, but expected. Over time, behaviors that initially provoke discomfort or moral conflict become routine, and individuals lose sight of the ethical implications of their actions. Breaking this cycle requires addressing not only individual actions, but also the systems that enable them. Accountability must extend beyond the perpetrators to the structures and environments that foster these behaviors. Zimbardo's insights reveal that authority's power is profound but not absolute. Understanding how systemic pressures shape behavior is the first step toward change. By replacing the silence of bystanders with collective resistance and challenging the normalization of harm, we can begin to dismantle the bad barrels that perpetuate cruelty. Zimbardo referred to this effort as a heroic movement. This idea will be discussed further. Philip Zimbardo explored the dark potential within ordinary individuals when subjected to powerful situational and systemic forces. However, his analysis does not stop at the descent into evil. It also emphasizes the possibility of resistance, heroism, and the reversal of these forces. Humans are not doomed to blindly follow authority or conform to harmful systems. Instead, they possess the capacity to act courageously, defy unethical pressures, and transform environments for the better. This reversal of the Lucifer effect is deeply rooted in self-awareness, moral courage, and the willingness to question authority, a trait resonant with Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch. Zimbardo himself noted that in experiments like Milgram's obedience study and his own Stanford Prison Experiment, not everyone succumbed to the darker forces at play. In the Milgram experiment, where participants were asked to administer painful electric shocks, a significant minority refused to comply, even under intense pressure from an authority figure. Similarly, in the Stanford Prison Experiment, some participants resisted their assigned roles, with a few prisoners choosing to leave after just one day of abuse. These acts of defiance demonstrate that even in environments designed to suppress individuality, some individuals rise above situational influences and choose integrity over conformity. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, someone who transcends societal norms and creates their own values, is a fitting metaphor for such individuals. A hero is not a blind follower of rules or traditions, but someone who critically examines them, challenges their validity, and acts in alignment with their own instincts and principles. This kind of heroism requires more than just courage. It demands self-trust and the capacity to reject collective pressures to conform. To foster such resistance, Zimbardo argues that individuals must first recognize the power of situational and systemic forces. Evil often thrives not because people are inherently bad, but because they are unaware of how environments shape their behavior. The ability to step back, reflect, and analyze the dynamics at play is essential. Carl Jung's philosophy offers a deeper psychological lens here. Jung believed that to achieve true self-awareness, individuals must confront their shadow, the darker, repressed aspects of their personality. Only by facing this shadow can one understand their capacity for both good and evil and make conscious choices to act ethically. This acknowledgement of the shadow is vital for heroism. Without understanding one's own potential for harm, it is impossible to truly resist external pressures to do wrong. Heroism also requires rejecting the allure of groupthink and tribalism. Throughout history, individuals have often been swept into harmful ideologies or movements simply to fit in or avoid social alienation. Zimbardo highlights how group dynamics can erode personal responsibility, making it easier for individuals to commit or tolerate unethical acts. A true hero, however, resists the urge to conform and instead forges their own path. Movements that demand blind loyalty or suppress individuality are antithetical to heroism. As Nietzsche argued, creating one's own values and rejecting imposed norms is essential to transcend mediocrity and achieve greatness. This individuality does not mean isolation or selfishness. Rather, it is about cultivating the inner strength to act according to one's principles, even when it goes against the grain. Such resistance requires not only courage, but also empathy and awareness of the broader impact of one's actions. Heroes understand that their choices ripple outward, shaping the environments and systems they inhabit. By refusing to participate in cruelty or injustice, they inspire others to do the same, creating a counterforce to the situational pressures that perpetuate harm. By teaching individuals about the psychological mechanisms that lead to conformity, obedience, and dehumanization, we can equip them to recognize and resist these forces. This awareness must also include an understanding of human fallibility, the acknowledgement that anyone, under the right conditions, is capable of wrongdoing. This does not make individuals weak. Rather, it empowers them to guard against those tendencies and strive for better choices. Leaders should be held to high ethical standards, and citizens must be empowered to question authority and demand justice. By fostering a culture that values diversity of thought and encourages questioning, we create the conditions for heroism to flourish. This is not a passive process, but an active, ongoing effort to choose the path of goodness over the abyss of evil. The line between good and evil, as Zimbardo reminds us, is not fixed. It is a line that shifts, shaped by the choices we make as individuals and as a society. By understanding the forces at play and embracing the heroic possibility within each of us, we can ensure that this line bends toward compassion, integrity, and human flourishing. The hero, then, is not just someone who defies authority or resists conformity, but someone who actively shapes the world into a better, more just place.